Hi, my name is Joe. I've been at Enable for about 5.5, 6 years now. Looks like I need to update my slide. I have worked in most customer-facing positions outside of support. I have worked as a channel sales representative or account manager, depending on how long you've been with us. I was a sales engineer. I worked as a PSM or partner success manager. I was lucky enough to help to create that team, which was quite fun. Had a blast there, and now I'm a head nerd. So very happy with my journey through Enable. Very happy to be able to run these education webinars for you folks, as my passion, I found at Enable at least, is learning as much as I can about the MSP world, and trying to pass that knowledge on to our partners. So first things first, we'll start off today with why are we talking about managed services? Um, First off, there's a lot of misconceptions as to what managed services really are, or what constitutes as a managed service, what makes us an MSP, um, especially in some of the newer MSPs that Enable partners with. Right, making that distinction is always going to be something that's a little bit difficult. So we'll help kind of define what managed services are, especially what fully managed services are. Right. And the reason we focus so much about making this distinction and looking at making this jump is it's a proven, reliable, stable IT services model. It's also the model where we see our best return on investment as MSPs, right? A lot of us started off as break fix. We reached that break fix ceiling, which is typically about $1 million. And then we have to figure out what we can do to improve our business, right? And the answer is typically going to be transitioning to this managed services environment, right? It's not an easy thing to do, but it's a necessity in my mind, right? Um, if we're going to become more mature as a business, moving to these fully managed services are something we just have to do, right? And move away from our break fix. So, definition of an MSP, right? Managed services are contracts that have some level of SLA associated with them and a flat fee, either per user or per device. Support services under the agreement are not billed per hour. Services are or support services are included both as proactive and reactive items inside the contract. So one of the things that I've noticed at Enable over the years is we do have a lot of, for lack of a better term, glorified break fix shops who think they're MSPs, right? Where they'll tell me, hey, I'm an MSP. Awesome. How much do you bill per user for your fully managed package? Oh, we don't do fully managed, right? Being the response there. And that breaks away from what an MSP is supposed to offer as their flagship service, right? Are MSPs always going to be 100% fully managed clients? By all means, no. Okay. Again, we all started out break fix. We've all gone through the transition or are looking at going through the transition. And if you can somehow have 100% conversion rate from break fix to fully managed services, you need to start teaching people how to do that, because I've seen nobody succeed with it, right? The shops that do say they are completely fully managed are rarities, and they're typically either shops that opened by selling only fully managed services, right? Which is what I did for my small side hustle MSP, right? Or there are shops that have cut ties with clients that don't want fully managed services, and that's never my intention, right? I'm not the biggest fan of firing clients. So what we see with best in class MSPs is they're about 80% fully managed, 20% break fix, a la carte, or proactive style contracts, right? So working with that misconception, right? And when we look at fully managed services, right? We note that this isn't block hour items. These aren't items that are going to be billed per hour. These are everything is included in the contract, the all you can eat type items, right? And we move towards this just because one, it's more profitable. Two, it's easier because we've standardized services across our organization. And three, every MSP has one of two end games in mind, at least every MSP I've ever talked to. And that's we want to retire to the Caribbean or the Mediterranean or someplace that is just exotic and floats our boat, or if we want to pass our business on to some mentee or family member so that they have a good head start in life. And whether we're selling to retire or passing the business on, business valuation is key when it comes to that, right? Being able to hand over a good nest egg or being able to have a good head start is always going to be based off of our valuation. And valuation always goes up the more fully managed services you provide, invariably, right? Um, we're looking at fully managed MSPs or MSPs that provide primarily fully managed services, getting valued in the 2 to 7 times valuation range, depending on their organization, at least that I've worked with. Some of the other head nerds have seen valuations that go up to 10 times, right? And that's just nothing to shake a stick at, right? And if transitioning our business to a more stable model can help us there, right? This is just going to be something we have to look at. Now, one of the things to also point out here is just because reactive remediation is included in your contracts doesn't mean that gives your end users the right to abuse that. Okay, so we will always run into circumstances where there's just going to be some build items, right? I myself ran into one as an MSP where I had one of my clients taking over almost 1,000 hours of help desk in a month-and-a-half span, right? It's just insane amounts of problems that they were having through no fault of mine or their own. Just everything decided to hit the fan. We had to have a long come to Jesus talk about, hey, we need to bill for some of these hours. We also now need to start taking that advice that I've given you to update your systems a little more heavily, right? Let's stop running MS-DOS because it's got the POS system we're familiar with, and let's start running a real OS and modern devices, right? Coming from what is to what isn't MSP services, we see the same definition. I swear to God, this isn't the same slide twice, but quite quickly, it's easy to list what isn't managed services because those are our break fix customers. Those are our a la carte customers. I want patch management and AV, right? And keep in mind, when we use a la carte in this fashion, we're talking about selling to end users. A la carte's going to come up later in this conversation, and we're going to talk about co-managed programs and reselling. Okay, separate conversation. What we're focused on now is MSP to end user, a la carte, break fix, or even your proactive deals don't count as fully managed, right? It needs to be that all you can eat, right, to be considered this, or better, right, co-managed, something along those lines, right? And we look at this as a maturity model, right? Or we look at this with MSPs as you're getting more mature, you're consolidating services, we're learning about standardization and anything that's falling outside of that standardization towards fully managed. It's not MSP services. So as a business, right, we've briefly mentioned a couple reasons that we look at doing this. We've briefly mentioned a couple key points as to why we're going to make this transition. Why should we upheave everything we've been doing as a break fix shop, and a successful one at that, right? I'm a single man worth about, my business is worth about $1 million, right? Why should I change that success I've had? Outside of the fact that there's just a cap on break fix, which we'll talk about a little bit later, right? This fully managed model brings our business stability, right? It allows us to operate in a world where there are fewer fire drills because we are proactively getting ahead of everything. It allows us to look at better managing our risk as a business because our revenue is more predictable. Our business valuation's gone up. We are typically more profitable as we bring in more fully managed services, because now we're documenting and standardizing and automating our services, right? It also allows us to better manage our growth. It's easier to add new clients when we have standardized services, when we're not doing what the client wants, we're doing what the client needs and providing the services we know are best. Right? It also is easier on our sales team, right? If you're selling one product, you get good at selling that one thing. We'll talk about that, right? It allows us to bring technicians in an easier fashion, right? Because now we've been able to standardize. Our technicians aren't drinking from a fire hose. We're able to set manuals and processes in front of them and say, this is how we work. This is what we need you to learn. Right. So it just boils everything down in our business, our MSP, to just being more stable, more consistent, more predictable, and in the long run, more profitable. Right. Because especially when we talk about growth, as a quick aside, growth doesn't have to be a new technician. It doesn't have to be a new salesperson. It doesn't have to be a new client. We can realize growth in revenue, one, by converting our already existing clients into fully managed, but also automate more. The more you automate, the more time you free up for your organization to work on profit or revenue generating activities, right? And that leads to MSPs who have become more operationally efficient, focusing on these fully managed services, seeing a raise in revenue, not because they're charging more, sheerly just because they are more efficient, right? They are watching automation and all of these actions we're going to talk about today, raising their margins, raising their profits, because they have to put less labor and less time into managing these clients. Right. So let's get to this slide here. All right. Sorry, I'm not the biggest fan of the animation, but this is the slide we want to take a look at. So we've got this light purple, dark purple, and pink box as we go up our maturity on the bottom, right, from low to high, and then our revenue, business valuation, and profitability there on the left from low to high. When we look at these reactive models, we can think break fix, okay, maybe a little bit of a la carte services in there. We're going to see a gross profit of right around 50%, with an operating income of roughly 1 to 5% and a business valuation of 0.3. Now, I think that 0.3 times business valuation is a little bit low. I tend to see 0.5. Okay, but that still tells us, taking that $1 million break fix shop as an example, if we were to sell our business, we're going to make 500K. Right? My business is valued at half. Right? So when we get to proactive services, this is where we're doing some proactive maintenance, a lot of reactive remediation through automation and that kind of deal. We're starting to see our valuation go up. So we see a about 25% jump in gross profit, 5% jump in operating income, and now we see our business valuation a little bit better at 1.5 times. Right. But proactive services still tend to cater to the needs of each individual client. So we're still minus that true standardization piece. And while recurring revenue is occurring inside a proactive model, we're still fluctuating month over month because we're selling block hours. Excuse me, had to cough there. We're selling block hours or billing for support hours, and it's just not quite as easy to predict month over month. Once we get into that pink box where we're truly a mature MSP and we are selling fully managed services or managed services, a distinction we'll talk about in a bit, we see our gross profit 75% and up. Right, we see our operating income 10 to 20%, and we see our business valuation here 1.5 to 2.8 times, right? And again, having discussions earlier, especially after the pandemic, we're seeing these valuation numbers just steadily climb, right? I myself, again, personally have seen 7 times valuation. Some of the other nerds have seen 10, right? So what it's boiling down to is we are just making our business more efficient, more profitable, and in the long run, more giving it a higher valuation. And we see this when we look at our chart here. So on the right hand side of our chart, we've got our break fix businesses broken out by revenue, and we notice that only 22% of them are identifying as annual revenue greater than $1 million, right? If I'm starting a business, that's not stats I like. I don't want a 20% chance to be more than $1 million in annual revenue. I'll take a 20% chance to be the next IBM, right? That's a gamble I'll take. But to get to a point where I'm putting food on the table is not something I want to gamble with. Right. And when we look on the left hand side of this, of the managed services centric, right, we're going to see almost half of that cohort being above $1 million in revenue, 40%. Right. So this is where we want to sit. We want to be uh, 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 higher up, right? We want to be closer to this fully managed model. Okay. And, just hitting the bottom line again, when we talk about this, and this was one of the things that was just wickedly interesting to me when I joined Enable and has continued year over year to be a trend, right? Owning an MSP and investing in this MSP is more profitable than investing in the stock market, right? If we look from 2008 to 2019, which is where my data ends here, but we can only assume it gets a little bit more skewed as we go through, right? We're looking at 19.7% growth in our investment, right? That's very, very, very good, right? So again, just driving home, fully managed services is the proper move to make. It's the move we need to be contemplating, right? So jumping into the meat of this conversation, what are our challenges? What are our pitfalls? What are some hurdles we have to go through? What do we need to be aware of as MSPs? We'll start with checklist of terms here. Okay, so starting off with all you can eat or AYCE agreement. Okay, I'm not going to use the acronym here. You're going to hear me say all you can eat. Pretty much what this says is I'm charging you flat fees for my MSP services. 60 bucks a workstation, 55 a network device, 250 a server, or something like 125 to 175 a user. And it's all you can eat. Okay. Proactive agreement, basically a checklist of services that does not include remediation, right? Just strictly maintenance and management items. And here, what you're going to hear me say, rather than proactive agreement, is going to be statement of work and standard operating procedures. So SOW and SOP. Now, your statement of work, of course, does include remediation, but let's be quite honest. When we see proactive agreement, right, it's immediately followed by. Okay. Then we see our pro or professional services, hourly billable items that are either time or materials or project based. Okay. No fully managed solution or provider or package is ever going to be truly all you can eat. That is a great way to put yourself out of business quick. Right? Think of it like a car dealership. The car dealership will sell you the car. They'll put the aftermarket rims on the car for you, but they will not support those rims, right? Okay, same comes for us as an MSP. A nice example is rebuilding a server or upgrading hardware. That's outside of our SOW. That's outside of our scope of work. Okay, and it has to be. Right? Workstation upgrades alone could put you out of business, not to mention what would happen with servers. Right? And we'll delve into that a little bit more. Then we have VCIO, or Virtual Chief Information and Technology Officer. Okay. VCIO services are what we're truly selling as MSPs. Or better yet, this is how our customers that are willing to purchase fully managed services view you. They don't view you as just a help desk. They don't view you as just a security software provider. They view you as a integral part of their business that is as big of a necessity as the software they need to run their jobs, the insurance they need to keep their business open, and you are key to this. Right? I always joke, as an MSP, I never sold software or services. I sold productivity and peace of mind. And if you've ever done a boot camp with me, I'm sorry you've heard that ad nauseum. You're going to hear it again today, right? Because I cannot stress enough that what MSPs are selling is productivity and peace of mind, so that your end users know they're not going to have mass amounts of downtime or a security incident to the best of your ability, right? Are you going to prevent every single one of your clients from getting hacked? No. It's never a question of if it's going to happen. It's a question of when it's going to happen, right? But your end users should at least be confident in you. Anywho, help desk is our reactive services team. NOC or SOC are our proactive services team, and our security operations center. We'll talk more about those. We have a master service agreement. We're not going to hear that come up too much, but it's a good term to know. ARR and MRR are annual or monthly recurring revenue. We will hear those terms quite a bit. All right, so challenges for our product-centric and or VAR companies, right? In this jump to fully managed services. The first hurdle is just accepting that you have to do it. Just because you've been doing something for a long time in the same fashion doesn't mean it can't get better, right? And this jump for us in these product centric and VAR companies are going to come with three major challenges. First off, your clients. Okay. Anybody can talk about break fix clients and the ease of converting them into proactive or fully managed clients, right? And if anybody says it's easy, I tend to kind of stop listening to them because it is difficult. Best in class MSPs, MSPs who have been selling fully managed services almost exclusively for the past half decade, still have break fix customers. Right? Back to, I'm never a fan of firing anybody just because they don't want fully managed services. If they're an already existing customer and they've been with you for a decade, keep them. Right? You may not be able to convert them, but it is what it is. Best in class, 80-20 as a split. 80% fully managed, 20% otherwise. And if we can approach those numbers and get very close to them, we're doing very, very well. Right? No need to create quote unquote bad press by firing people, firing customers that won't conform to your new ways. Right? Plus, the more you automate your fully managed services, the more you get to automate your break fix services. Right? Script it, script it, script it. The other 2 points we see here in requiring a different way of thinking, functioning more like an internal IT department, and investing in your staff and tools go part and parcel with each other in my mind. First off, transitioning technicians from break fix to fully managed is always going to be a bear. There are techs out there I know that don't like working in fully managed shops. They like break fix work. And that is what it is. Means we may have to see some staffing changes, right? And that's never the best thing, right? But it is what it is, right? And with those staffing changes comes in training. It comes to continuing education. It comes to all of these items that are just going to be uh 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 needed to get your staff to buy in to this particular transition as well. All right, popular mistakes we see with this transition. As we're moving up this maturity model away from break fix and into the fully managed world, right? The biggest mistake that I see are gonna be the first and the last examples here, right? Never leading with managed services and selling against yourself. So when we're selling fully managed services, first off, we want to be leading with it. It is our flagship product at our organization. It is what we are going to sell. There can be some variations and some wrinkles in there, but it is the tool we're selling, right? And that means no more a la carte selling. It means no more break fix program selling. It means you are selling fully managed. And this can be difficult, but it is the name of the game and something we're going to have to do, right? And this goes back to my popcorn, or goes back to an example of popcorn in a movie theater, right? We've all been to the movie theater, we've all ordered the small popcorn, and the person behind the counter says to us, well, for 25 cents you can make it a medium, for $1.50 you can make it a large. And you immediately go, I'm not paying another $1.50. I'm already paying $100 for a small popcorn, right? But 25 cents ain't bad. It's twice the popcorn. Maybe I'll want to refill on this small. We'll get the medium and whatever I don't use, right? And for 25 cents, they just upsold us. Simple, it's easy. This is a sales tactic that has worked for break fix and a la carte shops for years. And we're going to have to break away from it because we can't sell that way anymore. We can no longer sell and shop based on price, right? We are selling a complete, never light, a complete, fully managed package. Okay. And we sell this not by all the tech, not by all the software, not by all the solutions or all the knowledge or all the know how. What we're selling is predictability. right? That's what it is. And if we're not offering fully managed services, but we're selling predictability, right, we're falling a little bit short of the mark. And then the last big mistake I see with this here is people 1 foot in, 1 foot out of making this transition. This is a difficult transition. It's probably the second hardest transition you're ever going to make as an MSP. If you don't jump 2 feet into the deep end, this transition is going to take a decade and it's going to be a continual pain in your neck. Make the jump, make the move, don't look back. Okay? None of this half in, half out. Let's see where this goes. Let's test it. Now, that being said, there's always going to be a guinea pig. There's always going to be a first. Is what it is. Okay? But what I mean with this is let's not, split our sales team, split our support organization. Right? This is a move we make as a group and as a whole. Right? And this leads us to the question from MSPs, and we'll go over packages. Don't worry, there's a lot on that in here. But it goes just to the general overriding question of what am I selling as an MSP? Right? And the answers I typically get back when we don't have a nice cheat slide in front of us are we sell technology, we sell an IT solution, we sell monitoring, we sell proactive support, we sell automation, we sell backup, right? And I think this is, again, the wrong answer. I think the answer is we sell productivity and peace of mind, right? Or we sell predictability and outcomes. Okay. And that's because this is what the customers are interested in purchasing from us. The customers we're selling to are interested in fewer IT problems leading to more uptime, less downtime. There are fewer headaches, fewer security incidents, right? And one choke point. If something goes wrong, who do I get to yell at? Right? Unfortunate, but it is the case with this. So it boils down to we're selling productivity and peace of mind. And then let's also be quite honest with ourselves. Once a quarter, once a year, right? Something goes wrong with one of our vendors, right? As MSPs, and we have to have a difficult phone call, right? Emotions are high. Somebody's probably going to get yelled at, right? End users want the same thing. They don't want 1,000,002 vendors that they have to go complain about when they get ransomware, right? They want to look at the MSP, point the finger, scream and shout a little bit and say, fix it, right? Point blank. And this is, what we're striving to as MSPs. And the whole point of fully managed services is that finger pointing, that screaming and yelling, we're going to get around for the sheer fact that, again, we are building standardized, scalable, and repeatable packages and service offerings that allow us to control our end users' network as best as possible. There will always be emergencies, but we're going to prevent the vast majority of any type of incidents that we can. Right? And it brings, again, predictable costs, both for you and the end user. It's a good thing. Predictable support responses through SLAs. Predictable escalation, predictable communication through monthly business reviews, quarterly business reviews, and whatever you want to add to that list, right? Predictable quality of service, again, scalable and repeatable. So we talked a lot about picking and choosing our clients and who's the perfect client that we're looking for here, right? We are looking for a client that understands that managed services are not just about IT support. They are as critical to a company as legitimately liability insurance. Because what an MSP is doing is keeping you open. Just point blank. The better the MSP, the longer your doors can stay open as a business. Right? And this is what we're looking for. We're looking for partners that trust us as an MSP so that they don't have to go and try and create their own package out of the services we offer. They know they're in good hands. They trust you as a VCIO, and they're going to let those decisions be made by you. To a point, they might have some qualms. Hey, can we not patch on Thursday? Let's patch on Friday. It's just better for us. Sure, fine. But we're never going to come to the point where they're going to say, well, I don't want to patch because I want to pay a little bit less. Not an option and fully managed, right? And when we start to learn how to target these customers, right, what we're going to find when we look at this is, one, they're more common than we think they are, but we need to temper our sales expectations here, right? So while a perfect client allows us to build on our sales and marketing program and allows us to start refining our uh, uh, our process, our goal is to find these leads. And something we tend to forget as MSPs, or we may not have delved into, is if we get 100 qualified leads looking for managed services, we need to expect out of them, maybe 3 are going to sign with us. Because out of those 100 leads, 30% of them are probably exactly what we're looking for. A business that respects an MSP for what they are, understands that they are the experts in their field, and will allow them the freedom to make sure they're properly protected and managed. Out of those 30, you can land about 10%. 10% is a really good sales number to aim for with a land when we're starting off this jump. After this jump, let's bump that expectation up into a 20, 30% land. But even if we're thinking about an able here, where we have a well-oiled process for sales and a well-oiled sales machine, right? We start with our SDRs. Our SDRs are going to make 250 phone calls a day on average. Out of those 250 phone calls, if they can get 10 POCs, right, or proof of concepts, right, that 10 or 10 initial sales meetings per day, they're doing well, right? That means in a whole month, 20 working days, they're bringing us 200 qualified leads. Of those 200, we're probably going to land 10, right? Of those two, actually 10 is probably a bit low. We're probably gonna land about 25 to 30, right? And that's pretty darn good. We look on our sales team, if one salesperson brings home 10 deals in a calendar month, they're doing exceptionally well. And we need to have those expectations when we're walking into a small to medium business market, right? With a smaller sales team, looking for probably a harder client to find. We just have to find MSPs. You guys are looking for small to medium businesses that want fully managed, right? So keep those sales expectations in mind, right? And the last bit on here, I think we've just, beat to the ground. They're going to view you as invaluable to your business, and they're going to view you as a critically important piece. And they're just not quite big enough to get their own internal IT department, or they're not qualified enough to manage it for that matter. Right. And we'll talk a little bit more about who we're targeting as we go through our packages, right? So before we get to what types of products should I offer, we're going to go to our common journey, right? And first things first that we need to realize with this is our peers are there to compete with us, right? MSPs have to remain competitive, but they're also there to help us. MSPs, I've found quite nicely, more so than most small business owners or most small business types that I've worked with, love to educate, right? They also very much love to brag about the process and growth and jumps that they've made, right? And I am quite pleasantly surprised that even amongst the same city, I'll find competitors who will still discuss these differences or these processes between each other. And that's nice to see. It's a great resource for us. But what it also tells us is we're not all unique snowflakes. Sure, there are differences amongst MSPs in verticals, how we run our help desk, that kind of deal, but the principles and the theory are the same. So when we look at this common journey, making the jump to managed services, time and time again, we are all taking this same path where we're going to look at the products and pricing that we're going to provide, and we're going to start with smaller businesses. We're going to grow in those uh, 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 medium size to small businesses, and that's where we're going to see our services start. As we get more comfortable selling fully managed services, we'll grow. So we'll start in that 1 to 5. Well, okay, sorry, a little bit low there. We'll start in that like 6 to 50 range, right? Then we'll bump up to 250, right? Then we'll bump up to 500. Then we'll start looking at selling co-managed services, right? We're not going to look at trying to take on a 500 seat business as our first fully managed client. That's just impractical, right? And as we go through this particular journey, we're going to see plateaus in our revenue growth, right? We're going to go up, we're going to flatten out, we're going to go up, we're going to flatten out. And it's just the name of the game. I talked about this making the jump to managed services being the second hardest jump you're ever going to make. The hardest jump you're ever going to make is from 2 million to 5 million as an MSP ARR. It just is. Making the jump to managed services changes the philosophy of your company, right? And that $1 million break fix shop is going to turn into a $2 million MSP. It's not going to be overnight, but that's the shift we're going to see, and that's a difficult one. Once we get our standardized processes in place, once we get our foot in those waters, now we've got to continue to grow, and that 2 to 5 jump, where we're now doing things like operational efficiency overhauls to maximize revenue, hiring new technicians because our volume needs to be driven somehow, right? Hiring a new salesperson to fill that volume gap that we're looking at just becomes difficult. From every MSP I've talked to who's in that 10 million range, they will invariably say the 2 to 5 million jump was just the hardest time of running their business. It's also the time where we as business owners now have to seriously sit down and stop working in our business. We have to start working on our business. And that is just difficult. To go from a business that was run by you, with you working in it for a decade, to now trusting people, right? Such as a strong sales leader or a strong tech leader, right? Finding those people and trusting them is incredibly difficult. And that's probably one of the harder things in that 2 to 5 jump, 2 million to 5 million jump. But they have to be done. We have to take these steps in our growth process, because you as the business owner, you are the one with the dream. You are the one with the goal. You are the one with the vision, right? You're also probably the MVP in that you have the most knowledge, you have the most insight, and we need to start taking advantage of this when we're making the jump to fully managed services. You're the one who knows how you want stuff to get done. Document it. SOPs, standard operating procedures, are the name of the game, right? And starting to work on your business by creating those scalable and repeatable processes, by looking at aligning a tech and a sales management or leadership team that shares your same goals and giving the autonomy to operate, right? Those are very time consuming things. Those are also very difficult things to do. but you're not the only one to go through it. Okay. All right. So what are the common products that we're going to see, and what are the products that we're going to offer, right? And the answer from this, oops, I misspelled spoiler there. My apologies. I'm going to update that real quick. So what we're going to see here, right, is very typically based off of our client base, right? Am I in a legal industry or legal vertical? Okay, well, services offered, probably going to do a lot of compliance. Say with doctor's offices, dentist office, veterinary offices, right? That was my vertical, veterinary offices. A lot of compliance, more so than you would think. Okay, right? That's going to drive my services. Do I work with manufacturing? That's going to drive my services. Now, those products are probably going to be pretty unique to each individual vertical, but does it mean they're unique to each MSP? Not to a point, yes, but not really, because they all fall in these 9 boats that we're going to take a look at. 7 boats we're going to take a look at. Okay. And this is where I want to stress we're going to see managed core, managed security, and help desk items also labeled a la carte. So please understand, if I'm talking about a la carte to end users, it's different than a la carte to resell a product. And that's what we're seeing here with our fully managed services. We are removing a la carte to the end user, and we're looking at packaging our products either as an all-you-can-eat MSP service, or we're looking at taking one of these other common product types and turning them into a resold or co-managed program, right? So all you can eat is you control the network in its entirety. You are the king or queen of your kingdom, right? And you control that network. All you can eat typically also means you control hardware as well. Okay. I sold fully managed. Some of the most difficult conversations I would have during the sales process is I'd walk into a vet's office. I'd see a FortiGate firewall. I don't know how to manage that. We need to update your hardware, right? Because I've standardized across my organization. Okay. Managed core. This is where you're now managing the day-to-day proactive and reactive remediation that could be done through an RMM type tool, but you're no longer providing end user support. That's handled by an internal IT department. Okay. So not quite co-managed, but not quite all you can eat, somewhere in between. And we see the same with security. Okay, now I'm not doing that remediation. I'm not managing your end users, but I am providing security services, EDR, a SIM tool, patch, firewall, backup, and the like, right? So again, reselling to an IT department. All right. Help desk for employees, exactly what it says. Right? Pretty simple, pretty easy. And then co-managed here is where you resell pretty much your solution stack to a business. They are tiers 1 and 2 in support, and you're called in when it really hits the fan. You get to be the superhero, put your cape on, tier 3 supports here. Okay. Probably the most lucrative deals we could ever get as MSPs, right? Spoiler alert, co-managed is sold to legitimate upper mid to upper medium sized to large businesses, right? Where we're looking at 2,000 employees and up. Right? And co-managed services can be sold from anywhere from $50 to $100 a user, right? It's hefty. Okay, so these are the common places we're going to sit and we're going to migrate to. And we're going to see as we move from left to right on this slide, right? If we haven't recognized this, we can quickly recognize it now. I'm going to start fully managed. I'm going to get my feet wet in this world for about 2 to 3 years, 5 years, and then I'm going to be able to look at this managed core thing and I can resell it, right? Then I can move to managed security. Then I can move to help desk. Then I can move to co-managed, right? The more mature you get as an MSP, the better you are at selling these more high-end or these more lucrative deals, but you got to get all you can eat under your belt first. And then, of course, there's always going to be niche product or niche product, however you want to say it, right? And these are not things you jump into yesterday. These are things you do your homework on, where we're adding to our services offered outside of fully managed, right? Stuff like managed print or advanced security, MSSP services, right? But let's be honest, spinning up a SOC, which is required for MSSP services, is no small feat. I heard one of the MSPs that I was talking to was looking at spinning up a SOC to start offering MSSP services. They stated it's a $10 million cost. I don't know how accurate that is. I've never spun up an MSSP division myself, but every time that MSP gave me an estimate for something along those lines, right, cost to business type items, they were pretty spot on. So I'll take 10 million as a good rule of thumb, right? So operational maturity is just the name of the game here. All right, so we talked about what we're selling product wise, right? And this screen here is a great one to grab a little screenshot of, but who are these products appropriate for? So first off, down here, all the way at the bottom in teal, we've got our small businesses. We've got our single owner, home-owned businesses. Very rarely are we ever going to see fully managed services here. The exceptions are going to be doctors, lawyers, dentists, the high skill, high liability jobs, right? A one-man manufacturing plant probably doesn't need fully managed services, right? But that lawyer's office, they do. They're experts at their section of law, not IT nor compliancy. You as the MSP can provide great experience and expertise in those two sections. But where we typically see all you can eat services or these fully managed services sold is going to be from this white line down. So this 250 mark down to about 6. Those are the folks that are going to be prime for our managed services. Okay. Bigger, but not big enough that they have an IT department. This is also where we're going to start getting our feet wet once we're comfortable with fully managed services with our niche products like managed print, if that's something we want to jump down, or our next steps up in maturity where we're going to see managed security or maybe even managed core. Though managed core and MSSP services on top of the all-you-can-eat items become much more common in the mid-market. This 250 to 1,000 employee range. We may see some co-managed and help desk items there, but those aren't quite commonly seen until we start talking 1,000 employees and up. Okay, and our highly mature MSPs are the ones that are getting those deals. Right, Jason Murphy, one of the other head nerds, did a lot with co-managed at one of the MSPs that he was at. He was hired. They were a $20 million MSP, still not selling co-managed. When he came from them back to us here at Enable, they were a $100 million MSP, and they had just started selling co-managed services. Just to put in perspective how big of a bear those fully managed or those resold a la carte services are going to be, right? Sorry, co-managed or those resold a la carte services are going to be, right? So the second decision out of what are the packages that I can offer, that I can sell, is am I going to do this kind of resold style of a la carte, or am I going to stick with fully managed? Well, we already have my opinion on that, in that everybody starts with fully managed, It's the name of the game. It's where we're going when we make this jump first, right? I said jump 2 feet into the pool, but don't jump 2 feet into the 20-foot side of the pool, right? Let's start in the 3-foot end. Let's get our feet wet walking down the stairs so we can acclimate to what we're selling before we dive into co-managed and these resold a la carte items, right? Because fully managed has too many advantages for us to let it go, right? It's easier for our clients, our techs, and our own business and their business to understand. It's easier for sales to understand, right? It's easier to make money in this particular realm. Okay. The hard part is it's more expensive, right? It is more expensive than a co-managed solution. It's also going to be a little bit harder to find the fit for it. But once you've got the process and the arithmetic down, it becomes scalable. It becomes easily repeatable. Okay. And nice little screenshot option here, by the way. We see what we have included inside fully managed. And in honesty, it's easier for me to say what's not. It's going to be our projects. It's going to be our hardware upgrades and replacements. It's going to be managed backup, managed mobile, and managed audit, right? Our compliancy items. Compliancy always is a separate item, right? And backup is always going to be a separate item. As weird as this sounds, a lot of mature MSPs have a separate department for backup. It's its own beast. Okay. Those of us who have been up at 3 a.m. in the morning because of a fire doing a restore will wholeheartedly agree. Being an RMM or being an RMM tech or a engineer who's generating scripts for automation is not the same thing as being able to build a machine off of backups. Right? Outside of that, you're the king or queen of the kingdom again. Right? Everything else in the network falls onto you and your shoulders. When we look at these a la carte programs that we can bundle, and again, stressing, not to sold to end users, sold to businesses, right? As a resell, right? These co-managed deals. The advantages to these are they're just easier, right? They're cheaper, might be a little bit harder to make money, but cheaper means easier to sell. Go back to that little popcorn idea, right? And the other thing with this too is even though easier to sell is one of the advantages, it's also probably the largest disadvantage outside of it's more difficult to support. Because let's be honest, labor is the most expensive thing you're ever going to purchase at an MSP, right? But going back to easier to sell, right? Every sales team I've ever managed, right, from working at Cutco as a kid, walking door to door with to sell knives and managing teams like that, to uh, uh, working retail, to working at an Able. Every sales team has one thing in common. If you can sell more of a product, I'm selling that product as nauseum, right? Because salespeople are commission based. They want to put food on their table just like you. And if something's cheaper and that's why it's easier to sell, that's where they're going, right? And that's not a bad thing, right? For example, Men's Warehouse, I taught people how to sell shoes. We got 10% commission on shoes. They were reasonably cheap. The ones we sold at Men's Warehouse were reasonably comfortable for dress shoes. It was almost a guaranteed sale to get shoes if you were having somebody purchase a suit. And I focused on that. I focused on training my teams on how to sell shoes. It makes them the most money. It's an easy sell. It's it's just common sense. Right? So we need to be aware of these pitfalls when we're deciding which of these packages we're going to sell. And it typically boils down to we start fully managed, we get that motion, The more difficult motion under our belt, our sales team becomes comfortable with it, and then we start introducing these co-managed services, right? These core services. Right? And then the question becomes, once we decide on these packages, what do we include in our packages, right? And it pretty much boils down to a couple things. So first off, reactive services are going to be included in these packages no matter what, right? We're talking all you can eat. It is what it is. But we have to remember that there are a couple caveats to this. Remote work, point blank, it's in the contract. Okay? We're not firing up a truck to get an employee off site to ruin our productivity as an MSP to get work done for our end users. Remote work, all you can eat. On-site services is a whole different ballgame. Okay. Sometimes billed, sometimes not. Okay. More often than not, we're going to eat some of those costs, but we have those out of scope items, or those items that aren't included in our SOPs or SOWs that we'll have to deal with from time to time. So just to be aware. The other thing here is, please remember, unlimited remote support does not mean limitless remote support. Okay. That'll bite you in the butt once, it'll never bite you in the butt again. All right. Expectations need to be set. Okay, especially with our end users. What I used to do is I would sell fully managed programs, but I would, for the first 6 months of my contract with these folks, or first 6 months with my life of my life with them as I'm their MSP, is I would put them on a proactive plan and they'd buy block hours. The services offered would be the exact same, but I would use those 6 months to figure out how many hours per month they're using. And then I'd normalize my pricing as necessary. Right? That way I didn't have somebody spend another 1,000 hours with me in 90 days again. Right? Just insane. To think that we're going to be all you can eat means limitless support hours. We need to be aware of that. Right? And on site, when it comes into this sometimes, right, let's remember hardware upgrades, hardware replacements, also new software. It's outside of my current scope of work. That becomes typically an on-site visit, and it typically is billable. Right? So just some items, some food for thought. Right? So when we look at these packages and what's included, and we talk about our hours, we have to then go into software. Right? So let's just start with point blank, RMM is table stakes. So we don't have it on this slide. If you don't have an RMM, you don't have fully managed services. No ifs, no buts, no ands. It's just that is it, point blank. So what we look at being bundled on top of it hard cost wise for our software are typically these 9 items. The top 4, backup, spam filtering, email management, and antivirus, tend to be the most common. Okay. But we're doing this and we're bundling these together because it takes away the ability to pick and choose from our end users. Because end users are always going to try and save money, even if they're a perfect candidate for fully managed services. They would be remiss as business owners if they didn't try and save money. Right? When I was an account rep or channel sales representative here with Enable, right, I would have MSPs call me up time and time again. I'm so sorry to have this conversation, but is there any discounting we can get? My response was always the same. Never apologize. You're a business owner. You have to find a way to make more money. And if cutting costs is making more money, you've got to attempt it. Let's see what we can do. Right. And it's just, it is the sales process doesn't go any differently. Right. We always try to negotiate during the sales process. If you ever get somebody who goes, oh, price, cool, contract, dude, you get that contract to them so fast. Right. Lesser known or lesser bundles that we see inside this all you can eat world are going to be the rarities. Hardware as a service with something like a firewall, phishing testing, dark web monitoring. Not because they're not necessary, but now we're starting to delve into the realm of true specialties. And true specialties typically equal uh, uh, more expensive, and they just become a little bit more difficult to sell. Right? But that being said, we still need to look at bundling these if necessary. Right? The one up here I think I have the most problem with is I'm not the biggest fan of email archiving being a less frequently bundled item. I think I'm of the opinion that if you're filtering email, you need to be archiving email um, because there's obviously a security need. We might as well take care of it as best we can. But just my 2 cents there. All right, so next, screenshot it. Oops, let me back up. Let me move forward here. Okay, there's our sweet spot. Next screenshot here. What does fully managed look like on a server? What are the proactive elements of fully managed on a server? Okay, and we're not going to go through everything here. You guys don't want to hear me talk that much. That's just impractical. Okay, but what we should be seeing here is these services are impossible to cover manually. The complexity of just this slide alone means that I am going to shift the culture of my business to not only fully managed being prime, but also efficiency being prime. Document everything you do, right? Every step of every process should have an SOP associated with it, partly for interchangeability. Right? What happens if Jane and Jason are onboarding a client and heaven forbid they both get in a car accident on their way back to the office? Well, now we've got to send out Luke and Liz. If we don't have good documentation, dude, every tech does something does the same thing a million different ways. They'll never be able to get that work efficiently completed. But if we were following documentation in an SOP and had the proper automation in place, right, Liz or Luke would be able to take up that work and continue it seamlessly. Okay. And something we'll see over the next couple slides is automation percentages, right? 70% of this should be automated, right? Down from the server monitoring and maintenance at almost 100% automated, right? To report generation 50/50, to managed antivirus and backup items at again about 50/50. Right? Now we get to our workstations. Same thing as what we saw for the maintenance on firewalls. Right? We just see a little bit less here. And now that we're not managing so much third-party software, we're still going to manage some of it, but not all of it. Right? Because some of it we just can't manage. Right? Same security items, same maintenance items to a point, right? And the thing that drives me up the wall with this one is it says your workstation's offering should be 100% automated. I don't think so. I think you can strive for 100% automation, but I don't think you could ever get 100% automated. If you can automate your workstation offering 100%, please stop being an MSP. Start teaching people how to do it. I've been in this industry for a reasonable amount of time. I've never seen anybody with fully automated workstation, fully all you can eat packages. It's just I haven't seen it happen. But 95, seen it, right? So strive for the 100. We'll never get it. Also, good slide for a screenshot, right? Then we have our network elements, right? Or network devices, right? Because if we're managing the entire network, we've got to monitor and manage these as well. Okay, and typically we want some type of remote control with this, right? RMM offers the ability to SSH into devices, which is quite nice, right? But that's something we should probably look at having as well. And here it says 65% of this is going to be automated. And I don't disagree with that number. I think because a lot of what we're doing with network devices is these scheduled preventative maintenance items, which can usually be scripted, right? And we're monitoring the basics, right? What traffic's going in, traffic going out, what ports are open, right? And then what's the basic status of the hardware we're monitoring, right? So here, I think 65% automated is a reasonable expectation and one that we should be pushing for inside our org. All right, we talked about this a little bit, okay, with backup, managed mobile, managed audit and the like, and our project work, right? But just to drive this home, okay, server, network, and workstation upgrades do not get included in all you can eat. You will drive yourself out of business. Workstations being the slight exception there if you make some pretty stringent demands before looking at including upgrades in a la carte. First off, workstations need to get more expensive because those charges are going to need to be passed on, right? And then on top of that, we need to just start off with, if anything's out of warranty, it's outside of my scope of work, right? And going that drastic with an end user, if they know what they're doing well enough to want to include workstation upgrades inside their managed services, you know, they'll probably understand what we're dealing with, okay, and why those costs and those warranty information needs to be where it does. And then, of course, non-emergency on-site visits, right? If receptionist Ryan has gone through, locked himself out of his device, and he refuses to open a ticket, forcing you to go on site, you are paying for gas. Or sorry, that end user is paying for gas. They are paying that hour. They are paying that time. Now, if receptionist Ryan is willing to reset passwords remotely, that's included 100%. Okay, so keeping those differentiations in mind. Right. And this leads us to, once we're comfortable with this, right? How are we going to package these? Are we going to have a good, better, best? Right? Silver, gold, platinum, emerald, ruby, diamond. What's it going to be? And the way we're going to decide whether or not these packages or a single package is what we're going to sell is, first off, our maturity. Less mature, less packages, please. We're looking at scalable and repeatable. Okay. But then on top of it, our market. Once we get mature, our market decides most of this, right? If I'm in a small town and I'm managing every business but one, I'm never going to offer a package. I'm just going to try and grab that one business. That's where my sales and marketing is going to go. Okay. But if I'm in, say, New York City, all right, maybe we'll start thinking about how to price myself against the competition. Right. And then, of course, operational efficiency comes into play here, which, if we haven't been to operational efficiency as a boot camp, definitely do check that one out. All right. Next slide. How do we price our services? This is a hard question to answer for anyone in my position to any MSP. Okay. So the first thing we're going to talk about is all of this is going to be generalities. I do not know your geographical location. So when I say 60 a workstation, 55 a network device, 250 a server, I'm pulling one, what I used to bill, two, it worked in Raleigh, North Carolina. Okay. If you're in Tacoma, you live in a different geo with a different cost of living than I do. Okay. Our prices might be a little bit similar, but probably not. If you're in New York City, I guarantee you your prices should not be my prices. Right. I've seen MSPs in New York City going upwards of $400 a server. Right. New York's expensive, needs to be taken into account. If it's not, somebody's selling themselves short. Right. So just some items there to be aware of as we go through this part. So the first decision we're going to have to make in this realm is, are we going to go per device, or are we going to go per user? And this is more and more in my mind becoming a per user answer. And it's specifically because the cloud and virtualization is becoming more and more and more prevalent, especially with technology savvy end users. And we can take that with a grain of salt as we will. If they were truly tech savvy, they probably wouldn't be hiring an MSP, right? But they're starting to realize and learn, like, dude, those workstations are easily creatable in the cloud, right? They're realizing that that server that sits up right behind that cloud next to the sun in the big blue sky is easily replaceable, right? They might not know what the cloud is, hence the example, but they start to get replaceability. They're starting to get value. They're realizing that that physical box that was incredibly valuable, right? Servers were probably worth their weight in gold, if not more, to businesses, right? They're becoming less and less. So transitioning to this per user model is something I'm becoming a much bigger fan of. More and more am I becoming a fan of this. But this is your decision as an MSP. You know your geo, you know your market, you know your costs. Okay, make the decision here. But let's focus on the quote here. Just because it's what's been done doesn't mean it's what should be getting done, right? MSPs, more than any other business in my mind, need to change with the times, right? And we can see that in what, 30 years of history, right? MSPs started to get big in the 90s. If anybody started in the 90s, I would love to hear how different your business is now that it's the 2020s, right? And the answer is going to be drastically, right? We need to take that quote to heart, right? Our market moves so quick. It is what it is, especially because small businesses and technology are both so agile. All right. So, example here, okay, where we're looking at a 20 end user shop, okay, and we're looking at some older pricings. So 2021, okay, 2020 when this came out, right? But this is some nice sample pricing. Okay, general averages across the U.S. I'm not the biggest fan of a couple things on here that we'll talk about, but before we do, we look at our servers, okay, our 20 workstations, our network devices running 250 a server, 60 a workstation, 65 a network device. Okay, that comes out to be roughly 1,800 a month or 9,150 an end user. Okay, I think that's cutting our services a little bit short, right? So let's look at that 125, 175 an end user. Okay, and again, I like that pricing. Now, depending on the size of the business, also depends on whether or not we're going to go per device or per user. Small businesses, it's easier to go per device. It's more profitable for you as an MSP as well, right? Think about walking into a lawyer's office where it's a lawyer and the receptionist. 250 bucks a month to manage a server and 2 workstations is not enough money, right? And looking at them and saying, okay, I'd like to charge you almost 200 a user a month, probably not the right move, right? So we need to enable our salespeople here to make a good decision. We as an MSP need to sit down and think what we're going to be offering as services and, what's the best option for our cohorts. Now, couple quick things I don't like on here. Network device at 65 bucks. Okay, maybe you could convince me a firewall's worth $65, but under no uncertain terms do I price network devices higher than a workstation, because I'm never going to want to try and convince that a switch is harder to monitor than a workstation. Just don't want to have to convince an end user of that, right? So I personally dropped my network devices down to 55 bucks, a little bit less than a workstation. Okay, now your prerogative to take that advice or not. The other thing I don't quite like on here is the backup pricing at $100 a server and 15 bucks a workstation. Okay. Um, because of the services I offered in backup, utilized Cove, right, in the real world. So every workstation came with the virtual drive, right? I had my own device on my site where I would run the recovery console to have warm copies sitting in the cloud. Okay, I needed to cover that, so I bumped workstation up to 30. I bumped servers to 150. But I did a lot of work to determine why those numbers were going up. Okay, quickly to take a look at our a la carte items, we'll see some suggested pricings here. Okay, you can take a screenshot if you would like. We're not going to go over these as in depth. All right. But I used our costing calculator to come up with my prices. Okay, I very much love this costing calculator. And there's a couple things that we as MSPs need to keep in mind when we're looking at generating our pricing. First off, you have to know your fully burdened labor cost. That is the cost per technician per hour in your company. And it is not just salary, it is benefits as well. Okay, it is money spent to get that tech up and running. So 2 years ago, the national average was about $35 per hour. I believe it's closer to 55 nowadays. So we need to take that into account when we're looking at determining our pricing, because that fully burdened labor cost is what's going to control our monthly management pricing right here. Okay. The other thing we need to be aware of, at least in my mind, is discounts are for you, not your end user. So when we look at determining pricing, we're determining based off of list cost. We're not determining off of the volume discounts that you receive as an MSP. The way I used to look at those volume discounts is they were my vendor saying, thank you for shopping with me and being a valued customer. We're going to cut you a discount so you get better margins on your product. I almost never pass those discounts on to my end user, right? The other thing with that is I also use those discounts to fund automation time, right? Generating automation's never free, right? So coming in and finding a way to get that time paid for and make some revenue off of that, always a reasonable idea. So what we look at inside this costing calculator, which if you do not own, your PSM can provide for you. If you don't know who your PSM is, email me, joseph.ferla, that's F as in Frank, ERLA, at enable.com. It is now inside the chat. And I will find out who your PSM is and get them to reach out to you with the costing calculator. Okay, it's an invaluable tool for me. Right. And what we look at here as an example for, say, a server, right? Web protection's $2, EDR's $3, the agent is $3. I understand that it's $2.99, $2.99, right? But let's just round up to make our numbers easy. Okay. It's going to take me roughly 60 minutes of proactive work per month on a server. It's going to take me roughly 30 minutes of reactive remediation, which leads me to wanting to keep somewhere in the realm of margin that I believe is acceptable in my mind. It's about 60 to about 80%. Right? I'm going to look at my total cost being $60.50. I'm going to try and hit 75% margin, because that was typically my goal, right? And it's going to run me about $250. I run my end users about $250. And going through and walking through this decision process, what is the cost of my software? What is the average amount of time I'm going to spend on this per month? What should I think I be pricing this at? It's very reasonable to look at this, right? To determine whether my margin is just way too high and it's almost unethical, right? That 95 and up margin range. Or it's way too low, 45 to 50% margin. I need to up it, right? So here we could see a couple examples of things that are probably going to be a little bit low in the margin world, right? 50% margin here on workstation backup because it's $10. I'm charging 20, right? Probably not the best way to look at it. We can also see some items that may be a little bit high, right? 92% margin on documents backup, right? What I was looking with documents backup somewhere around the 60% margin range, because let's be honest, what are you really doing with documents backup? Once every quarter restoring a couple files? If backup set it and forget it, document backup is even worse, set it and forget it, right? So keep those items in mind as we are going through this costing conversation. All right. And when we're going through this process, efficiency is always going to be key for us, right? Efficiency is the name of the game for MSPs. So when we look at our efficiency, right, we've got whole boot camps designated to just this, right? But for our today's boot camp, what we need to know is two things. First up, the first time you do something, document it and learn how to do it. The second time you do something, review that documentation, make sure it's right, cement how to do that thing inside your head, and then the third time you do it, automate it. Those are your efficiency items for today, right? The more you document, the smoother everything in this transition is going to go. The more you automate, the more money you're going to make, right? Just point blank. Every MSP I've talked to can point to efficiency and automation and the direct correlation to their bottom line, right? And here we're looking for repeatable, scalable, predictable processes, revenue, the whole 9 yards. And if operational efficiency isn't the name of the game there, right? Uh, 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 we're failing, right? Because when we look at an operational maturity model, right, and we look at our 4 quartiles, best in class being the top 25, worst in class being the bottom 25, we see a very direct correlation to our bottom line, right? So taking this best in class with a $2 million revenue MSP, we're going to look at a net profit of almost 370K when it comes to efficiency. Okay. Dropping down 1 quartile into that median range, you lose almost 200K in profit. Right? The bottom quartile almost losing money. Okay. Efficiency directly impacts your bottom line. And I cannot stress that enough. Right. And one of the things here, just to have its own slide, is the true secret to operational efficiency in any realm is just going to be simple. The more simplistic you can make your SOPs, or your standard operating procedures, the more simplistic you can make your automation, the more simplistic you can make your sales process, the more simplistic you can make your documentation process, it's just the better it's going to be. Okay. Don't simplify it to make it hard. Right? I'm looking at you, Thunderbolt to dock, or Thunderbolt ports on the back of Macs. All right. If you get the joke, thank you. If not, managing Macs for the Windows admin will be coming up in January again, I believe. But don't simplify it to make it hard. Simplify it to make it efficient, and focus on efficiency. Okay. The more complex something is, the more it tends to get ignored. Okay. All right. The last portion of this particular presentation is going to be some hurdles that we are going to have to overcome. First things first with this transition, right? Because there's going to be a few hurdles that we're going to need to go through during our transition from break fix to fully managed, and we're just not going to be able to get around it. And the largest of these is probably going to be how we are staffing. So I'd like to, wow, excuse me. I would like to say, before we get into this slide, first off, I'm not telling you that if we're a 10-man shop or a 5-man shop and we're switching from MSP or from break fix to fully managed services, that we automatically need to make these 4 teams. We just need to be aware that this is our end goal, and that if we are going to duplicate roles, we're very prescriptive with it, and we are very, very targeted with how we are doing this. So we're always going to need our help desk or our support team. It just is what it is. Okay. Next up, we are always going to need a NOC. A NOC being our professionals or proactive services team. And a lot of times we'll see a team of engineers um, uh, working on our NOC team, right? Or some type of like noise oversight committee, or whatever you would like to call it, right? And then we'll have our field service team, we'll have our pro services team, and this is billable. Now, where we see a lot of overlap in this, or at least what I've seen most commonly, is tier 3 support tends to be NOC and pro services, right? Tier 3 support should be 1 or 2 people in a 10-person support team, right? 5 tier 1 techs, 3 tier 2, 2 tier 3, right? And they're the folks that probably are going to be the most knowledgeable, right? But they're also only going to be handling 5 to 10% of your tickets, right? So they're also going to have the most free time. And it's nice to have those folks working on some side projects, if you will, automation, doing any type of major project work that's going to be highly lucrative, that kind of deal. Okay. Field services is really hard to combine. We're just going to have to bite the bullet there. There's always going to be a need for on-site visits, and it's going to be up to you and your MSP as to how we accomplish that, right? Um, uh, and typically, it's just is what it is. That we're going to have, say, a tier one tech uh, uh, go go out and work in the field, or a tier three tech go out into the the field, right? Um, just because of the nature of that particular beast. And to drive home, right? We can split people, but be disciplined about it. Don't approach these team responsibilities ad hoc and at random, right? Let's process it, let's document it, let's set up standards and expectations, right? There's never going to be something that's done that's not a clear responsibility of somebody, right? And that's something we need to be aware of, especially in an MSP world, right? Because if we look at, say, an 8-hour day for a tier three tech, and it's this ethereal understanding that that tech's going to automate something at some point in time. Well, Monday rolls around, they just got a new project building a server or rebuilding a server for one of your clients, right? And then all of a sudden, something happens in another client's SQL environment where a database gets deleted. That tier three tech is needed to help with that restore, right? Well, we just went Monday through Thursday with probably a full 40 hours worth of work there. There's no time to automate, right? And the excuse that's going to be given is, well, I know it's something I should be doing, but my job description and my needs say I have to finish this first. So writing things out, putting it in as an expectation in the job description, right? Building it in to that particular uh, 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 position's expectations is always going to be necessary. And then as you grow, we can start taking responsibilities away. Tier three tech. We just hired an engineer. You no longer have to automate. We're going to have somebody doing it 24/7, right? Or well, 8 hours a day, right? Tier two tech. We brought in an operations manager, so you don't have to report so much on the ticket audit that we need to determine where we're going to be applying our manpower to automate or script items, right? So we need to be aware, adjust, and adapt, right? But that being said, role switching every week, every month, you're just going to be driving this into the ground, right? We're expecting these growth milestones to be taking place over, a quarter, over 6 months, over year time frames, right? So let's be as prescriptive as we can in this particular uh, setting, right? And on top of that, we also need to think about who we're putting in what position, right? And I love to use my time here at Enable because one of the things I did when I got here in sales is I didn't know a lot about our product. So I quickly had to find people that I could call in favors with, right? And that made that meant making friends across our org. So we have one of our support technicians who's still with us since I got hired. Is probably the smartest person I know inside the RTP office for RMM or inside RMM, right? This gentleman just knows the tool inside and out. There's not a question. I've seen stump them, right? It is just nuts. probably sounds like a pretty good idea. If they were support, look at graduating them to dev, right? But if we sit down and we look at this particular person's personality, in that they are reasonably good at educating and talking to end users or partners, right? They are incredibly even keeled. As a matter of fact, I think I've ever seen them mad, even when we have a partner in dire straits, just screaming and cursing at them over the phone. We've all been in that situation before. I've had to yell at support. You've had to yell at support. It's just going to happen, right? But those character traits alone dictate that this particular human being probably needs to remain in support. They are going to be most effective for the enable organization there. Now, they're going to move up the ladder and support as high as they can, right? But their personality means they need to be there. Another support rep that I met when I originally started at Enable is now in dev, but their personality dictated it, right? Or helped that decision, right? No matter the severity of the ticket, be it incredibly low or incredibly high, everything was a fire. This particular individual gets frazzled whenever anybody yells, and somebody in a stressed emergency situation in support is going to. Calling support's going to, right? It's just the nature of being a human. Not the best person. If they're already twitchy, if they're already, for lack of a better word, if they're already a person who gets frazzled and stressed very easily, support's probably not the best role for them. But this individual knew the same amount as the first example. Okay, we're going to put them into development. They know our product inside and out. They're part of support because they like fixing problems, but they're just not good talking and interacting with partners or end users. Dev it is. Okay. And we need to think about that with an MSP, right? Think about where we're going to be offering opportunities based off of our personalities, our knowledge bases, and how well we interact. Right. Second hurdle that we are going to take a look at is tools. So let's just start off with this tools conversation and say that I'm not an enable salesperson. If you use Insight RMM, great. If you use Cove Backup, exceptional. MSP Manager, awesome. EDR, cool. Right? But in honesty, for this conversation, I don't care who you buy from. ConnectWise, Autotask, Kaseya, whatever. Who you purchase, that's your business's decision. Okay. But you need to have these 4 top items at minimum. Any otherwise, you are not an MSP. And it's so weird that we have to go over this. But coming from Break Fix, we may just have a remote access tool and we're good. Right? So we need to look at multi-tenancy in our tools. Right? We need to take a look at what can we integrate with, right, for ease of use and effectiveness, right? And we look at our stack. So our stack has to, first off, control a PSA. No more ticketing tool, no more Excel spreadsheet. We need a full-blown PSA. We need an Autotask. We need a ConnectWise. We need an MSP manager as we're growing. Fully mature Autotask and ConnectWise, of course, right? We need those items where we can start managing our text day to day. We can start managing an inventory. We can start managing assets. We can start managing our tickets in a better manner, in a more effective manner. And we can start adding automation to that particular process. Autotask and ConnectWise will go so far as to control payroll and CRM capabilities. Okay, and that's a necessity for fully managed, because any otherwise standardization and automation isn't going to happen. Okay, I think it goes without saying we need an RMM. For anybody on this call, if we need to talk about why an RMM tool is a necessity for fully managed products, shoot me an email. we need to have a much deeper conversation and a much more in-depth conversation is what's going to happen as we transition to fully managed, because that's just the backbone of our business. Okay. We need some type of documentation tool, and I'm going to wrap passwords in here as well. So we need to be looking at something like Passportal or LastPass. We need something that's going to control a KB, and we need something that's also going to store passwords securely for us. Okay, that's not Dropbox, that's not SharePoint. Okay, we need a third-party tool outside of that. Okay, something where we can truly control permissions a little bit better than the Microsoft suite. No offense to Microsoft. And then we have to have a minimum viable security suite. Okay, typically we're going to see an EDR tool, spam and mail filtering, patch management, and backup, even though it's outside of our typical scope of work and it's an a la carte item. Okay, we still need it. And here, I'm drawing such a hard line in the sand that if I'm selling fully managed and you don't want a part of my minimum viable security package, I will kill the sale. Mine included email archiving. I can't tell you how many prospects I said, if you don't want email archiving, I'm not going to work with you. Here's another MSP. I'm still taking care of these people. I'm not leaving them high and dry. Here's a nice reference, but I'll kill the sale. I've got no problems doing that. I was confident enough as an MSP in my sales ability that I knew I'd find another prospect. And that's partly something we need to become okay with as MSPs, right? The other thing we need to be aware of inside our stack is we don't skimp on our mission critical items. I understand that pricing negotiations during a sales process are a real thing. Striving for discounts are a real thing, right? But do not buy a cheaper tool that does 75% of what you need just to increase your revenue, because it will invariably come back and bite you in the butt. Invariably. And as you grow as an MSP, we'll see that strain more and more and more because we're not giving ourselves the ability to be as efficient as possible. Right? We don't look at an RMM tool that doesn't have take control built in, right? Just to save a couple bucks here and there, right? And again, I don't care if it's Enable who we go through, right? But buying an RMM tool and a standalone take control product is going to, one, probably end up being more expensive in the long run, and two, getting everything into a single pane of glass, right, is a real thing. All right. It drives efficiency. Again, I don't care if it's Enable. I'd love for it to be Enable, right? But if you folks are ConnectWise partners, great. I'm not the biggest fan of Kaseya, but I do like the Datto-Task products, right? Those are good products, right? But again, single panes of glass. Anywho, okay. All right. Then we talk about labor. Okay. The biggest idea is, how do I keep my labor costs in line? Right? And this is probably the largest hurdle we're going to cross. Right? Because let's be quite honest. I almost don't care what type of business you're running. Labor is your most expensive thing. Point blank. Right? It's your single biggest expense. And the need for labor is going to be bottomless. Right? And you can't be cheap with labor. Right? You have to hire a appropriate skill set, an appropriate skill level with competitive salaries to keep and maintain an employee base. Now, actually, I shouldn't say salaries. I should say compensation, right? Because I know of MSPs whose salaries are a little bit below average. That's fine. Their benefits package is nuts, right? Health insurance, that kind of deal, right? I know one MSP that I talked to, super big MSP, right? They're just at national average for salary levels, but they have some of the best retention, right? Because benefits are bought, purchased, and distributed by the company. Okay, the employees don't have to pay for healthcare, right? The MSP eats that cost, and it keeps retention, right? But they're not skimping on the work that they're purchasing. Okay. So when we look at how are we going to keep labor costs in check, right? The need for labor is bottomless. I need to find a way to deal with that without hiring more, right? And it's going to be automation. It is always going to come back to automation. And this is partly underlined by the fact that there's always work to do. So if you go and ask your techs if they're busy, the answer is always going to be yes, right? Find me an MSP where a technician can sit for 30 minutes and do nothing, and I'll show you not an MSP, right? So we need to build that automation in there. We need to build time into our business, and that's how we're going to keep our labor costs lower, right? Average MSPs, 200 to 300 devices per technician. Once you start delving down the automation rabbit hole, a best-in-class automation MSP, 1,000 devices. Cream of the crop, 1,200 devices per tech. That's how they're keeping labor costs down, right? Best-in-class MSPs, their technicians can manage the same amount of devices as 3 to 5 at an average MSP. It's a lot of time saving. That's a lot of money saving. That's a lot of automation, though. And it's going to take time to get there. It's a gradual building process. Okay. And we come to, in this particular section, back to that structure, right? Where we're always going to have more tier 1 techs than we have tier 3 techs. It's the name of the game, right? And we'll use my 10-person example where we have 5 tier 1, 3 tier 2, 2 tier 3, right? And the tier 3 techs own the creation of the automation. Our tiers 1 and 2 own the opportunity generation. Your tier 3's best source of what they should be automating is literally the water cooler for tier 1 techs. The minute your tier 1 tech starts complaining on a regular basis about a singular ticket type or singular process that's taking up so much of their time, it immediately should be tried to be automated, right? You can audit tickets, you can do that kind of deal. Do not get me wrong. Those are highly effective. I'm a huge proponent of tier 1 techs know most of the dirt. If you could automate away the nitty gritty dirty stuff, you're doing very, very, very well. So just some items there, right? The next item we're going to have as a hurdle is it is very, very time consuming to generate processes. So why, right? If it's quicker for me as the business owner to just go fix it, why should I document that process? It takes me 5 minutes to fix it. It's going to take me 2 hours to write this user manual, right? Well, first off, predictability, right? We sell productivity, predictability, and peace of mind as MSPs. And the only way to make things predictable is to document and process everything. Okay, the better your documentation, the better your business valuation. It actively hits your bottom line, right? I had an MSP that I worked with when I was a channel sales rep in 2017, where they were looking at selling their business and they decided not to. They were valued at roughly 2 times. Okay. In 2020, when I was a PSM, right, they were again looking to sell their business, and they had spent the past 3 years automating and documenting. Their business valuation was the one of the few 7 times valuations that I mentioned I saw earlier. Now they grew as an MSP, right? Still the same organization, though, still the same owner, going up 5 times in valuation, or 5 points in valuation, if you will. That's pretty darn good, just for spending 3 years documenting. Now, there's some outside factors in that as well, right? The economy, the MSP market, you know, stuff that's just way too complicated for me because I'm not an economist or that smart, right? But we can at least say that all of that work documenting and automating did have a positive effect on their business valuation. We also focus on scalability and repeatability internally. Okay. There's no point in doing something that you can't repeat. If you're doing everything one off, you're wasting your tech and yourselves time. Scalability and repeatability. And that all comes back to you've got to have good documentation. If you want it to scale, you can't brute force. You've got to have everything laid out organized. You've got to have everything laid out ready to go. You've got to make it easy to train, easy to hire, easy to do, easy to interchange. Right? And it just goes without saying, allowing employees to figure out how to do things their way just hurts. Because Jane doing things Jane's way doesn't mean Luke can come in and do it the same way. Find me 2 technicians off the street who look at performing monthly maintenance for their devices in the same exact fashion, and I'll show you 2 technicians that were planted there. Right? But if you create the process, you've made standardization and interchangeability available in your company. Everything becomes smoother. Okay. And what are some of these processes that we're going to look at? We're going to look at automating. Okay. We're going to see things like how our tickets are worked through our SLAs. How is our escalation working with our SLAs? All right. Once a ticket's received, it needs to be assigned within 15 minutes. You can do that automated through your PSA, right? After that 15 minutes is up, we need to have somebody looking at the ticket in 2 hours and 45 minutes maximum, defined by an SLA. Once that tier 1 tech is looking at that ticket, they'll get 30 minutes to determine whether or not they can actually fix this. If the answer is no, goes to tier 2. Tier 2 gets an hour. If the answer is no, it goes to tier 3. Tier 3 is going to be the one to fix it. They now have X number of hours or days to get completion on that ticket. Okay, it's got to be predefined. It's got to be processed out. That way, everything runs like a well-oiled machine. Right? We don't flip-flop around tickets. Right? I know that sounds easy. Come on, we've all seen that ADD tech who's got like 20 windows open at the same time, all with a different ticket, and they're flicking here and there. Multitasking never works. Everybody likes to tout, I'm a great multitasker, which may very well be you. But study after study has shown that if you're doing 2 things at once, you're working on 2 things at 70%, and it's going to take you more than twice as long to finish those 2 tasks than if you were to do one, then the other. We complete one ticket before going to the next ticket, or we're completing a part of the ticket. Okay, I've got a ticket to install this software. I know the download's going to take 10 minutes. I have to reset a password in one of my other tickets. I get the download happening for that piece of software, and then I can go and send a 2-minute reset password email or command out. That's fine. That's not multitasking. That is finishing something, even though it's a single step in a ticket, and finishing another step before going back to that previous item. That's okay. Multitasking is trying to install that software with one hand and trying to send that email with the other, if that example makes sense, right? And then the biggest one on this slide, for any fully managed program, onboarding. Your onboarding needs to be standardized. It needs to be written as a process. Okay. Break fix onboarding is pretty much installing a remote control agent and going. There you go. You've onboarded a client, right? To be super glib and super simple, right? Fully managed is going into a client, performing a network assessment, right? Standardizing any hardware you may need, getting agents on these devices in a standardized fashion, upgrading any hardware that may need to be upgraded, right? Working with any vulnerabilities that may have been found on the network, educating end users on how you as the MSP are going to be working inside their environment because it's the first time they've ever worked with you, right? Probably maybe even the first time they've worked with fully managed services, right? Educating them on how you're going to get their tickets into your help desk, right? Onboarding becomes a bear. And if it's not documented, it'll never get done efficiently. It was a pleasure talking to you guys today. This is a topic I tend to be pretty passionate about. If this is something you folks want to delve in further, contact your PSM. They'll be more than happy to have some conversations with you about this. If they're not equipped, or if you're delving too far into the topic for the PSMs, let me know, or ask them to wrap me up in a meeting. I'll be more than happy to talk to you folks. You've got my email, joseph.ferla@enable.com. And even if you just want to provide feedback for webinars, I'd be happy to hear that as well. Anywho, it was a pleasure again. Thank you guys so much for attending, and I'll look for you folks in the next boot camp. I'm going to close the meeting now. Bye-bye.